Okay, this is gonna be a rather long video, but it's gonna be on the fourth chapter of the first division, of course, the first part, which Heidegger never wrote the part 2 or 3 um, of this book. Heidegger's Being in Time. This is the Macquarie translation, which is the one that I actually prefer. I don't own the Stanbot translation, but I like to check it out from the library sometimes. Anyway, I have various videos on Heidegger's Being in Time, and they all precede the fourth chapter. All the videos that I have on Heidegger are all on this part, this little part. But except for one, actually. I'm going to be doing this chapter is going to be on this, or this video is going to be on this chapter, the fourth chapter. This is being in the world as being with and being oneself, and the they. Okay, this is a chapter about, of course, being in the world and Dasein with respect to other Daseins. The who of Dasein is also considered, and this is a very interesting, very awesome chapter, my favorite chapter by far of Heidegger's Being in Time. Chapter 6 of the first part is a close second for me. So I am organized here. I have 20 things I want to talk about. 24 or something things I want to talk about here. So, the first thing is the idea of being oneself. Being oneself is given here. Let's see. By directing our researches towards the phenomenon which is to provide us with an answer to the question of the who, we shall be led to certain structures of Dasein, which are equal primordial with being in the world, being with and Dasein with, Mitsein and Mitdasein in German. In this kind of being is grounded in the mode of everyday being oneself. The explication of this mode will enable us to see what we may call the subject of everydayness, or the they. So being oneself is a big thing here. It's not just being who you are. It's very difficult. It's very complex here because it involves yourself and others. So we kind of boil down to this kind of issue is self prior to other, or is other prior to self. I'm gonna have a full video where I just beyond this where I just talk about that problem with respect to this. Okay, second. This is the second paragraph, page 151. But it is not contrary to the rules of all sound method to approach a problematic without sticking to what is given as evident in the area of our theme, and what is more indubitable than the givenness of the I. Okay, so what is stated here is that the I think therefore I am. If you're Descartes is very indubitable. We can't doubt of the I and the givenness of the I being there. Okay, and does not this givenness tell us that if we aim to work out this primordially, we must disregard everything else that is given, not only a world that is, but even the being of the other eyes. The kind of giving we have here is the mere formal, reflective, and awareness. The mere formal, reflective awareness of the I, and perhaps what it gives, is indeed evident. This insight even affords access to a phenomenological problematic in its own right, which has in principle the signification of providing a framework as a formal phenomenology of consciousness. So that's one thing that is important. The mindness of the Dasein involves a indubitability of the givenness of the I, of what Descartes says. even though Descartes is not included here, it has a lot to do with that. I'm going to read the third paragraph here. In this context of an existential analytic of factical design, the question arises whether giving the I in this way we have mentioned discloses design in its everydayness. If it discloses design at all, is it then obvious a priori that access to design must be gained only by mere reflective awareness of the I of actions? What if this kind of giving itself on the part of design should lead to our existential analytic astray and do so, indeed, in any manner grounded in being of design itself? Perhaps when design addresses itself in the way which is closest to itself, it always says, "I am this entity," and in the long run, it says this loudest when it is not this entity. Design is in each case mine, and this is its constitution. But what if this should be the very reason why, approximately and for the most part, design is not itself? Okay. The issue here is, what if the aforementioned approach, starting with the givenness of the I to design itself, and with a rather patent self-interpretation of the design, should lead the existential analytic, as it were, into a pitfall? If that which is more accessible by mere giving can be determined, there's presumably an ontological horizon for determining it. But what if this horizon should remain in principle undetermined? It may well be that it always ontologically correct to say that this entity, that I am it. Yet the ontological analytic which makes use of such assertions must make certain reservations about them in principle. Okay. Let's see here. The I is a non-committal formal indicator. The world, and that would reveal the I as itself as its opposite. Okay, so 152 is where that says. The word I is to be understood only in the sense of a non-committal formal indicator, indicating something which may perhaps reveal itself as its opposite in some particular phenomenal context of being. In that case, the not I is by no means tantamount to an entity which essentially lacks I-hood, but it is rather a definite kind of being which the I itself possesses, such as having lost itself. Okay, now what's given here is this idea that it's possible that the I, even though I am I, and I have I-hood, that the I could not be itself, that it could reverse it. I, as a non-committal formal indicator, could make the I as its opposite. So though I still have I-hood, that could happen. Okay, now this is where we get into some good things here. Page 154. With myself, I, and everything else, I-hood is found elsewhere other than myself, so I could be found as design's opposite. Let's see, the number, this 154 is where he kind of gives this this one right here, the reason as to how one gets from yourself to others. But even if it is the boat anchored at the shore is assigned in its being in itself to an acquaintance who undertakes voyages with it. But even if it is a boat which is strange to us, it is still indicative of others. The others who are encountered in a ready-to-hand environmental context of equipment are not somehow added on in thought to something which is proximately just present at hand. Such things are encountered from out of the world in which they are ready to hand for others. A world which is always mine to in advance. Okay, so he defines others. Now, essentially, thus Design's world frees entities which not only are quite distinct from equivalent things, but which also, in accordance with their kind of being as Design themselves, are in the world in which they are at the same time encountered within the world, and are in it by way of being in the world. These entities are neither present at hand nor ready to hand. On the contrary, they are like the very Design which frees them, in that they are there too, and they're with it. So if one should want to identify the world in general with entities within the world, one would have to say that Dasein too is world. Okay, so in the third chapter, what is given is this idea of a environment. The environment is the area of beings which I comport myself to. That's a kind of different way of saying it. But there's beings in the world, which is also my being, and Dasein comports itself to its being. And the environment involves equipment, and there are things vorhanden, present at hand, which is where if I were to let's say I had a pencil here, and if I were to break it, and that has no use. I'm just sitting there staring at it. It's there, but there's no use for me for it. That's present at hand, vorhanden, and then there's ready to hand. Let's say of this chapstick, ready to hand or zuhanden is a being which is there for my use. Like Heidegger in the third chapter gives the example of a hammer. A hammer, I understand the being of a hammer as to its use for me. I can hammer it. I can hammer a nail into wood. That's how I understand the hammer, and that's how I understand the being of the hammer. So, given things present at hand and things ready to hand, okay, there's these two things. So there isn't just those two things. There's a third thing, but there is Dasein. Okay. Dasein identifies itself in things that are not itself by things that are not itself that does the same thing. That's what Heidegger says. Now, Heidegger uses the word how. Dasein frees others from the world by picking the others out from the beings present at hand and ready to hand. Dasein looks at the world and is in the world and has beings present at hand and ready to hand and has all those, and it recognizes its own being as it comports itself to its being, and recognizes what it does and sees that in other beings, which is not itself, and thus you pick out the others. That is how the others are freed from the world. That's how the freeing thing comes in, because it's picking the others out of the ready to hand and the present at hand. Okay. What else did I have? Okay, and that's also it's the use of the being there too. Thus, in characterizing the encountering of others, one is again still oriented by that Dasein, which is in each case one's own. But even in this characterization, does one not start by marking out and isolating the I, so that one must then seek some way of getting over to the others from the isolated subject. To avoid this misunderstanding, we must notice in what sense we're talking about the others. By others, we don't mean everyone else but me, but those over against whom the I stands out. They are rather those from whom, for the most part, one does not distinguish oneself. They are, for the most part, one does not distinguish oneself. Okay, so we have a bunch of people, and then I have this chapstick. I'm not going to distinguish myself as different from anything but this chapstick, given all these people. Okay, thus this being there too. Okay, those among whom one is two. That this being there too, auch Dasein, with them does not have the ontological character of a being present at hand along with. A being present at hand along with, versus a being there too. This with is something of the character of Dasein. The two means a sameness of being, as circumspectively conservable being in the world. With and to are to be understood existentially and not categorially, but by reason of this with-like being in the world, the world is always the one that I share with others. The world of Dasein is a with world, Mitwelt. Being in is being with others. Their being in themselves within the world is Dasein with. Okay, that is pretty interesting. Okay, when others are encountered, it is not the case that one's own subject is proximally present at hand, and that the rest of these subjects, which are likewise occurrence, get discriminated beforehand and then apprehended. Nor are they encountered by a primary act of looking at oneself in such a way that the opposite pole of a distinction gets ascertained. They are encountered from out of the world, in which conservatively circumspective Dasein essentially dwells. Others are encountered environmentally. This elemental worldly kind of encountering, which belongs to Dasein and is closest to it, goes so far that even one's own Dasein becomes something that it can itself proximally coming across its own Dasein. Only when it looks away from experiences and the center of its actions, or does not as yet see them at all, Dasein finds itself proximally in what it does, uses, expects, avoids. In those things, environmentally ready to hand, in which it proximally concerned. It is proximally concerned. So he's kind of talking about how we find the others. How do we find the others and free the others from the world? This is very interesting. I highly recommend that you get this book and read it if you are interested in phenomenology at all. And this is kind of a version of phenomenology called hermeneutic phenomenology. Okay, I need to turn the page here. Okay. Now this Dasein with, it frees one. 1 through 7 here. Okay. The expression Dasein, however, shows plainly that in the first instance this entity is unrelated to others, and that of course it can still be with others afterwards. Yet one must not fail to notice that we use the term Dasein with to designate that being for which the others who are freed within the world. This Dasein with of others is disclosed within the world for a Dasein. Being with is an existential characteristic of Dasein, when factually no other is present at hand or perceived. Even Dasein's being alone is being with the world. The other can be missing only in and for a being with. Being alone is a deficient mode of being with. Okay, so he's talking about that even if we're in a indifferent mode of being with, if we're deficient, if we're in a deficient mode of being with and not recognizing the being of others, it's still a being with. The being of oneself is still the being of others. The being of oneself, Heidegger is pretty much saying, involves ontologically a being of others. Okay, what else? Being alone is a deficient mode of being with. Being with is not a occurrence of several subjects. Okay, so Heidegger says many times of what being with is not. Being with is not an occurrence of designs being with several subjects, or a numeral or a number of subjects, or a plurality of subjects. It's not that. It's not involving that. It's not that at all. It's existential. That's ontological, and it's ontological, existential, and essential too. It's existential and ontological, and then following that it is essential. Okay. Now that we got that, we have to go to a kind of care, a kind of concern, Zorga, which he gives a new name. The name is solicitude. Even concern with food and clothing and the nursing of the sick body are forms of solicitude. So it's care involving other designs. So solicitude is care involving others. With regard to its positive modes, solicitude has two extreme possibilities. It can, as it were, take away care from the other and put itself in his position in concern. It can. Okay, so we have two things. We have leap in for him, or leap ahead of, or leap forth, or leap forward. Solicitude can take away the care from the other and put itself in his position in concern. Thus, it can leap in for him. This kind of solicitude takes over for the other that which he is to concern himself. The other is thus thrown out of his own position. He steps back so that afterwards, when the matter has been attended to, he can either take it over as something finished and at his disposal, or disburden himself of it completely. In such solicitude, the other can become one who is dominated and dependent, and even if this domination is a tacit one and remains hidden from him. This kind of solicitude, which leaps in and takes away care, is to a large extent determinative for being with one another. It pertains, for the most part, to our concern with the ready to hand. Okay, so first we have the leap in. In one, the other, given or design, has in a design besides oneself, that particular design has concern and care for things, and this positive mode of solicitude will leap in and dominate, basically, by taking over and taking what concern this other design has. So he will leap in and dominate. That's one mode. The other mode, in contrast to this, there's also the possibility of the kind of solicitude which does not so much leap in for the other as leap ahead of him. In his existential potentiality for being, not in order to take away his care, but rather to give it back to him authentically as such for the first time. This kind of solicitude pertains essentially to the to authentic care, that is, to the existence of the other, not to a what with which he's concerned. It helps the other to become transparent to himself in his care, and to become free for it. So leaping ahead is a positive mode of solicitude, in that he doesn't take away his care, but rather gives it back to him authentically as such for the first time. This helps the other become transparent in himself, and to himself in his care, to become free for his care. Solicitude proves to be a state of Design's being, one which, in accordance with its different possibilities, is bound up with its being towards the world of its concern. So it's a being towards the world of its concern, and likewise with its authentic being towards itself. So we have a being towards the world and being towards itself. To where this comes in, to where this factors in. Being with one another is based proximally and often exclusively upon what is a matter of common concern in such being. A being with one another which arises from one doing the same thing as someone else. So that's how we kind of understand that. That's how we kind of understand how a Dasein besides oneself is in fact Dasein, and not ready to hand or present at hand. Okay. So so this is kind of where the idea of empathy for Heidegger comes in. It was kind of bigger for Husserl, but the idea of empathy does come in. Everyday being with one another maintains itself. On the other hand, they devote themselves to the same affair in common. Their doing so is determined by the manner in which their design, each in its own way, has been taken hold of. They thus become authentically bound together. Okay, so these are. Can you see how this is working? Whether it's a leaping in or a leaping ahead of, they're positive modes of solicitude, in that a Dasein oneself and a Dasein with the other is bound together, and they're kind of being brought together in all this solicitude. It's kind of linking a bridge, and later Heidegger does talk about this little bridge. Yeah. They thus become authentically bound together, and this makes possible the right kind of objectivity, which frees the other in his freedom for himself. Okay, so I highly recommend that you read this for yourself. But can you see that in a negative mode of solicitude, that the being is still there. There's still a being with, but it's still there. The being with is still there. But in a positive mode, an actual authentically bounding together is made. Not only in distinguishing the other from the rest of the world and freeing the other from the world, but it's in either leaping in or leaping ahead of, a positive mode of solicitude bounds it all, bounds self and other together. Basically, what is stated later, a ontological bridge is given. Everyday being with one another maintains itself between two extremes of positive solicitude. That which leaps in and dominates, and that which leaps forth and liberates. It brings numerous mixed forms of maturity. To describe these and classify them would take us beyond the limits of this investigation. just as circumspection belongs to concern as a way of discovering what is right at your hand. Solicitude is guided by considerateness and forbearance. Like solicitude, these can range in their respective deficient and indifferent modes up to the point of inconsiderateness or the perfunctoriness. I like the word perfunctoriness, for which indifference leads the way. Okay, so the deficient modes of solicitude. I'm trying to explain it right. Doesn't take away the being with. The being with is still there. It doesn't remove that aspect. The aspect of being with is still there, ontologically and ontically as well. It's just that these leaping in and the leaping forth as the positive modes. What's different about that is similar to the I-it versus the I-thou distinction of Martin Buber. So, what is different here in the positive mode is considerateness and forbearance. They thus become authentically bound together, which makes possible the right kind of objectivity, which frees the other in his freedom for himself. Okay, so this is kind of a guiding of what the right mode of solicitude should be. It's not necessarily going. It's not really necessarily going for, oh, we should all be together and such. But it's kind of going for, that's how we should kind of pick the other out from the world and liberate it. There's not a whole lot of ethical things here. There's no ethical things of what we should be doing, but it's showing the possible little lanes of solicitude and how it's all being with no matter what. Okay, so personally, I would use these as kind of using those leaping in and the leaping ahead as ways of interpersonal attachment, of ways of how we should interact with one another, along with using the terminology of Martin Buber. It's a kind of way of just talking about, as kind of, I think that from this, you can give us a sort of ethical prescription as to how we should interact with one another. But Heidegger doesn't really get that here. He's just showing the lanes as to how we can be and are related in our being. Okay. All right. Now here we're going to get this, this little difference between self and other. Thus, as being with design is essentially for the sake of others. This must be understood as an existential statement as to its essence. Even if the particular factual design does not turn to the others and supposes that it has no need of them or manages to get along without them, it is in the way of being with. See, it's all in the same thing. In being with as the existential for the sake of others, these have already been disclosed in their design. With their being with, their disclosedness has been constituted beforehand. Accordingly, this disclosedness also goes on to make up significance, that is to say, worldhood. And significance as worldhood is tied up with the the existential for the sake of which. Okay, the structure of the worldhood is such that the others are not proximally present at hand as free-floating subjects along with other things, but show themselves in the world in their special environmental being, and do so in terms of what is ready to hand in that world. Okay, so the big quote here: design is essentially design is essentially for the sake of others. Then we have this little thing of for the sake of which. And as you can see how that works, if design is for the sake of others, it is also for the sake of itself. So you can see how this little thing kind of clashes between self and the self and other relation. 161. Okay, now we get into the idea of knowing oneself. Knowing oneself is grounded in being with, which understands primordially. But because solitude dwells proximally and for the most part in the deficient, or at least the indifferent modes, in the indifference of passing another by, the indifferent or deficient modes of solicitude, the kind of knowing oneself which is essentially and closest demands that one become acquainted with oneself. And when indeed one's knowing oneself gets lost in such ways as aloofness, hiding oneself away, or putting on a disguise, being with one another must follow special routes of its own in order to come close to others, or even to see through them. So what does it mean to know oneself? Knowing oneself is grounded in being with. Knowing oneself doesn't involve just yourself, the authentic self, as Heidegger explains later. Knowing oneself, think about that, given what Heidegger says. Knowing oneself, that would involve everything that would be involved in being with. Okay. But just as okay, and then we have knowing and when indeed one's knowing oneself gets lost in such ways as aloofness, hiding oneself away, or putting on a disguise, being with one another must follow special routes of its own in order to come close to others, or even to see through them. Okay, so you can see how there's a closeness between self and others. For design to have encounters with others, and to see the others, one has to pretty much go through different specific things to get past this closedness that others had, because Heidegger points out that the others are not open. They're primarily not open because of the deficient, or at least indifferent modes of solicitude. But just as opening oneself up or closing oneself off is grounded in one's being with one another as one's kind of being at the time, and indeed is nothing else but this. Even the explicit disclosure of the other in solicitude grows only out of one's primarily being with him in each case. In this phenomenally proximal manner, it thus presents a way of being with one another understandingly, but at the same time it gets taken as that which primordially and in the beginning constitutes being towards others, and that makes it possible at all. Okay, now we get to empathy. The phenomenon, which is none too happily designated as empathy, Einfühlung, is then supposed, as a word, to provide the first ontological bridge from one's own subject, which is given proximally as alone, to the other subject, which is approximately closed off. Okay, empathy. He obviously doesn't really like the term because it says it's none too happily designated. This is the ontological bridge. Of course, being towards others is ontologically different from being towards things which are present at hand. The entity which is other has itself the same kind of being as design. In being with and towards others, there is thus a relationship of being from design to design. I just love this. Okay, just the fact that empathy, we can possibly have a ontological bridge from self to other, or from design to design, from other to other, or however you want to really phrase it. It's all the same within being with. Let me get to the idea of projection. The entity which is other has itself the same kind of being as design, but it might be said that this relationship is already constitutive for one's own design. The relationship of being which one has towards others would then become a projection of one's own being towards oneself into something else. The other would be a duplicate of the self. Okay, the relationship of being which one has towards others would then become a projection of one's own being towards oneself into something else. Something else. So there's a little bit of a... You can't really draw a line between self and other. Self is other and other is self. Being with is being... being with involves being towards oneself and being towards other. Being towards other cannot be distinguished as being towards other, and it can, and being towards oneself cannot be distinguished as being towards oneself. What is involved here is projection. It's a relationship of being which involves being towards oneself, is a projection of that into something else. That is what the ontological bridge of empathy is. The other would be a duplicate of self. But while these deliberations seem obvious enough, it is easy to see that they have little ground to stand on. The presupposition which this argument demands, that design's being towards the self is being towards another, fails to hold. As long as the legitimacy of this presupposition has not turned out to be evident, one may still be puzzled as to how design's relationship to itself is thus to be disclosed as to the other as other. So he's going to kind of show how this works. Not only is being towards others an autonomous, irreducible relationship of being, this relationship as being with is one which with design's being already is. Of course, it is indisputable that a lively mutual acquaintanceship on the basis of being with often depends upon how far one's own design has understood itself at the time. But this means that it depends only upon how far one's essential being with others has made itself transparent and has not disguised itself, and that it is possible only if design, as being in the world, already is with others. Empathy does not first constitute being with. Only on the basis of being with does empathy become possible. Okay. So, what is just said here, he said that he's kind of showing how it is the fact that design's being towards itself is being towards another, and how being with is there no matter what, and empathy does not create being with, but empathy is possible only with being with, and being with is always there. Okay. But the fact that empathy is not a primordial existential phenomenon any more than is knowing in general does not mean that there is nothing problematical about it. The special... Okay, yeah. And here, again, he kind of gives the statement that other does not involve several subject or a numeral. What does he say? What is this? He say numeral. Okay. Oh yeah. Does in their design with are treated merely as numerals. So such a number of subjects is discovered only by a definite being with and towards one another. This is a inconsiderate being with. Okay. Before 22. Okay. One's own design, like the design with of others, is encountered approximately and for the most part in terms of the with world with which we are environmentally concerned. When design is absorbed in the world of its concern, that is, at the same time it's being towards others, being with towards others, it is not itself. Who is it then who has taken over being as everyday being with one another? Okay, so then this gives the kind of idea, as he does various areas, of how being with in design involves absorption in the world, given concern. I think that is worth noting about how that works. In his circumspective dealings in the world, what is also in the averageness is what I'm trying to say. There involves a absorption, and this is before section 27, where he asks, who then is this? Who has taken over being as everyday being with one another? And it's awesome because he also ends up concluding that nobody is the who. Nobody. Okay. Now this he kind of gives distantiality, subjection, averageness, a leveling down, as well as publicness. Publicness is the synthesis of all those things. Okay. Alright. So basically, he's going to talk about what the they means. And the they really is nobody, but we'll come to understand that. But I just took a break, but I've been filming for a while, so I'm on the home stretch. So in the asking of who is this that's taking over everyday being as everyday being with, and it's from this that he's going to talk about the they. But he gives various things, like, first of all, we're going to talk about distantiality. In one's concern with what one has taken hold of, whether with for or against the others, there is constant care as to the way one differs from them, whether that difference is merely one that is to be evened out, whether one's own design has lagged behind the others, and wants to catch up in relationship to them, or whether one's design already has some priority over them and sets out to keep them suppressed. The care about this distance between them is disturbing to being with one another, though this disturbance is one that is hidden from it. Okay, so we're talking about here, it's concern about what one has taken hold of in being, whether with, for, against the others. It's a constant care as to how one differs from others. It's a bit of a disturbance, as he says. It's a concern. It's a issue as to how one differs from other, and it's differences in various ways as to whether design is behind it, ahead of it. In various forms of differences. The care about this distance between them is disturbing. If we may express this existentially, such being with one another has the character of distantiality, or Abständigkeit. The more, but this distantiality, which belongs to being with, is such that design as being with one another stands in subjection, Bottomessigkeit, to others. Okay, so this distantiality is the distance and difference between self and design, as in one's design as well as other. And subjection involves how the design is subject to the other. It itself is not. Its being has been taken away by the others. Design's everyday possibilities of being are for the others to dispose of as they please. These others, moreover, are not definite others. On the contrary, any other can represent them. What is decisive is just that any inconspicuous domination by others, which has already been taken over unawares from design as being with. One belongs to the others oneself as, and enhances their power. In subjection, oneself belongs to the others. One belongs to the others oneself and enhances their power. The others, whom one thus designates in order to cover up the fact of one's belonging to them, is essentially oneself, are those who approximately and for the most part are there in everyday being with one another. The who is not this one, not that one, and not oneself. Not some people, and not these some of them all. The who is in the neuter, or das Mann, or the they. So, first of all, let's talk about subjection. It's related to related to distantiality. Design in its everyday being with one another stands in subjection to others, if thus it's subject to them. Given this distantiality of how we want to look at our differences, and also in this paragraph is defined what is meant in Heidegger's use of the they. What is meant by that is not this or that person or some people and not others, or the whole of all subjects, but merely one. Das Mann in German, if you say the verb sein, to be, ich bin, du bist, sie, das Mann ist, he, sie, she, es, it, mon meaning one. It's mon, das man, or in a sentence in German, one would use mon as if you say, how do you do this, or mon, or one would find it. I don't really know how to give a good example, but mon really just means one, as in, like, we say one would think that blah 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 blah. One would do it this way. One being neuter. So it's not a certain kind of area of subjects, but rather just the essence, I guess, is of all subjects, or the neuter one. The idea of one is kind of the essence of all types of things that are subjects. Okay, next. Next, along. Okay, we're gonna have this distentiality, averageness, and a leveling down, which is kind of all factors into a publicness. Next, we have averageness. Averageness is basically when we say average, everydayness. The they has its own ways in which to be. That tendency of being with which we have called distentiality is grounded in the fact that being with one another concerns itself as such with averageness, which is an existential characteristic of the they. The they in its being essentially makes an issue of this. Thus, the they maintains itself factually in the averages of that which belongs to it. Okay, so it's average. That's kind of self-explanatory if you read Heidegger at all. Next, we have a leveling down. Every kind of priority gets noiselessly suppressed. Overnight, everything that is primordial gets glossed over as something that has long been well known. Everything gained by a struggle becomes something to be manipulated. Every secret loses its force. The care of averageness reveals in turn an essential tendency of design, which we call the leveling down of all possibilities of being. Okay, so when he says overnight, everything that is primordial gets glossed over as something that has long been well known. It's almost like a lowering of standards, or a lowering of a almost like a talking down. Like, let's say you are shooting basketball, and let's say you make a beautiful three-point shot. Like, let's say you're shooting hoops, and you make a beautiful 3-point shot, and you make it. It's just beautiful, like swoosh, And then your friend just gonna talk it down. It's like, it wasn't even that good at all. It's like a talking down. It's like a talking down of what really happened. So, something primordial being glossed over, or a secret losing its force. Everything that you try really hard to gain becomes something that is manipulated. So leveling down is kind of bringing things down to what they really aren't. Bringing things down from reality. Okay, so distentiality, averageness, and leveling down all come to a publicness. Distentiality, averageness, and leveling down as ways of being for the they constitute what we know as publicness, or the Öffentlichkeit. Publicness proximately controls every way in which the world and design gets interpreted, and it is always right. Not because there is some distinctive and primary relationship of being in, which it is related to things, or because it avails itself of some transparency, but because it is insensitive to every difference of level and of genuineness, and thus never gets to the heart of the matter. By publicness, everything gets obscured. So we're talking about the publicness of the they. Distentiality, averageness, and leveling down are all referred to when we're talking about the they. The one, of the essence of things that is not oneself. That is neither present at hand or ready to hand. So, given this distentiality, we're gonna see how we're different. See how one will try and see how it's different from the others. And the one and they are average, and it will all be leveled down, given the they, and then thus there will be a publicness, or a Öffentlichkeit, or a openness, to where everything gets obscured, to where everything is, every difference of level and of genuineness, thus never gets to the heart of the matter. By publicness, everything gets obscured, and what has thus been covered up gets passed off as something familiar and accessible to everyone. Can you see how this is kind of an issue? The distentiality, averageness, and leveling down are ways of being of the they. They're ways that the they is. And this is all together publicness, the way that things get obscured, the way that we never get to the heart of the matter of the they. It's the way in which the world and design together, the self and the other, gets integrated. So we can see how that works. Now we have a disburdening, or a disburden. The they is there alongside everywhere, but in such a manner that it has always stolen away whatever design presses for a decision. Yet, because the they presents every judgment and its decision as its own, it deprives the particular design of its answerability. Because the they presents every judgment and decision as its own, it deprives the particular design of its answer and answerability. Okay, so if you can see how publicness works. Say something if I want to make a decision or a judgment. No, it's all going to be obscured because the they and the being with is looked at altogether as the not only as the existence as well as the essence of the they and of the being with and the self and the other together in one kind of together as one as well as one as a whole, existential and a categorical kind of whole, as the they together as a whole other, I guess. It's going to shut out the particular answerability of the particular design. Thus, I'm trying to see how you can see how this works. How you can see how you will not get to the heart of the matter. Because the they is there alongside everywhere. it was always the they who did it, and yet it can be said that it has been no one. In design's everydayness, the agency through which most things come about is one which we must say it was no one. So now we can see who is the who of who is the who of being the world and being with it and design. It's the they, obviously, but the they obviously ends up being no one, given this obscuredness. You can see how all this shit is just kind of, it's just so intricate and delicate. So disburdening. This is what you can understand as how the particular design is deprived of its answerability. Thus, the particular design in its everydayness is disburdened by the they. Not only that, by thus disburdening it of its being, the they accommodates design. If design has a tendency to make things easily and make them easy, because the they constantly accommodates the particular design by disburdening it of its being, the they retains and enhances its stubborn divinity. Okay. So, even though the they and how it is involves obscuring and blurring out the real heart of the matter by depriving of its answerability the particular design, and thus disburdening the particular design. You're also accommodating it, so that it's good and bad. It's a kind of a mixed bag. Okay. So by backwards. So by disburdening the particular design and given the everydayness, they accommodate design. Now this is cool. In designs, and now this is cool. I'm gonna say this again. In design's everydayness, the agency through which most things come about is one which we must say it was no one. Okay. Now this is a big quote. Everyone is the other, and no one is himself. Oh. Okay. 166. I'm almost done. Alright. Now, okay, this is where we say that the they is the nobody. The they, which supplies the answer to the question of the who of everyday design, is the nobody to whom every design has already surrendered itself in being among one another. Okay, so who is the who of everyday design? Given the they, it's nobody. I just love it. It's beautiful. Beautiful. Then we have this idea of constancy. In these characters of being which we have exhibited, every day being among one another, distentiality, averageness, leveling down, publicness, and the disburdening of one's being and accommodation, lies that constancy of a design which is close to us. This constancy pertains not to the enduring being present at hand of something, but rather to design's kind of being as being with. Neither the self of one's own design, nor the self of the other, neither the self of one's design, nor the self of the other has yet found itself or lost itself as long as it is in the modes we have mentioned. In these modes, one's way of being is that of inauthenticity and failure to stand by oneself. Okay, neither the self of one's own design um, this constancy pertains not to the enduring being present at hand of something, but rather to design's kind of being as being with. Neither the self of one's own design nor the self of the other has yet found itself or lost itself as long as it is in the modes we have mentioned. In these modes, one's way of being is that of inauthenticity or failure just to stand by oneself. Okay, now that's interesting. Basically, what constancy is, it's all of these modes of being with, and this is the facticity of design. This is the way everything is. And I mean, this is just kind of beautiful. I have to kind of think about this about whether I agree, but I probably am going to, because it's just kind of clicks it for me. I would say. Now, this does not lessen the facticity of design either. This is the facticity. This is the way things are for design. In these characters of being which we have exhibited every day, being among one another, this distantiality, averageness, leveling down, publicness, and disburdening of one's own being, and accommodation, lies that constancy of design which is close to us. This constancy pertains to design's kind of being as being with, neither the self. This constancy pertains to design's kind of being as being with. So constancy really is this entirety of all these modes of being with. Okay, now I talked about how the who of design is nobody, given the they. Okay, and then basically he says here again, the they and the who and the being with and all this does not involve several subjects, or it doesn't involve any number of subjects. It's an existential and essential way of talking. 167. Okay. The they is an existential, and as a primordial phenomenon, it belongs to design's positive constitution. That's also very interesting. The they is an existential, and as a primordial phenomenon, it belongs to design's positive constitution. So the way design is, its positive constitution is the they. Okay. Now, here in page 167, we have a differentiate between the they self and the authentic self. Heidegger's idea of authenticity is a authentic self is one that is unique and is itself as itself is, not as really any one self is. And the they self is of course, the they among the they. The self of everyday design is the they self, which we distinguish from the authentic self. from the self which has been taken hold of in its own way. As they self, the particular design has been dispersed into the they. As they self, the particular design has been dispersed into the they. Dispersed, and must first find itself. This dispersal characterizes the subject of that kind of being which we know as concernful absorption in the world we encounter as closest to us. When entities are encountered, designs the world frees them for the totality of involvements which the they is familiar, and within the limits which have been established with the they's averageness, approximately factual design. Is in the world. So we have those two kinds of selves, which they are really the same. All right. What's last? From the kind of being which belongs to the they, the kind of which is closest. Everyday design draws its pre-ontological way of interpreting being. This very state of being, and its everyday kind of being, is what approximately misses itself and covers itself up. This very state of being, in its everyday kind of being, is what approximately misses itself and covers itself up. Okay. All right. Now, the definition of the authentic being oneself does not rest upon an exceptional condition of the subject, a condition that has been detached from the they. The authentic being oneself is rather an existential modification of the they as an essential existential. I can't talk. Oops. Okay. Last thing I want to say: the authentic being oneself is an existential modification of the they as an essential existential. So you can kind of understand how I've been talking for so long. How you can kind of understand how this whole thing is existential primarily and essential secondarily, but how it still is essential. That is the end of this long chapter in this long video. If you have any questions on Heidegger on this chapter or whatsoever, feel free to comment below or whatever. I doubt really anybody is watching now, but